Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Leaders in Supply Chain Talent podcast. I'm your host, Shub Faujdar, Head of Training and Development at Alcott Global. I'm very excited to have Carlos Torres as our guest today. Carlos is an HR leader with a wide experience, including HR business partnering, center of expertise, and HR transformation leadership roles. He has extensive experience working with MNCs in US, UK, Japan, Switzerland, Netherlands, Malaysia, Russia, Morocco, Angola, Dominican Republic, Venezuela, and Trinidad and Tobago, basically all over the world. Carlos currently is the Leadership and Talent Senior Director at ASM International. Prior to joining ASM, Carlos had worked at Imperial Brands, Korn Ferry International, and Accenture. He has a major in production engineering and has completed a postgraduate certification on change management. We are very, very excited to have you today with us, Carlos. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks for the invitation, Shub.
Absolutely. Carlos, I think it might be great to just hear about your career journey. And I think in your case, it's absolutely a journey through so many different locations as well. And what has been your driving force for your career?
No, thank you so much, Shub, again, it was such a lovely introduction as well. It gets complicated by every year in my career it seems like I added another country or another experience, and I think that's what addressing your question, that's what always drive my I have drive in all my learning and all my journey in the HR profession. But as you mentioned, I'm not a typical HR professional. I'm actually a production engineer. It's just a fancy way in my university to call an industrial engineer. And I was very fortunate that half of my career, through half of my studies, you have to do an internship, and I was lucky enough to actually stay in my internship. So that's how my
Mhm.
career, my professional career, truly started, because I was working with a consulting company, and that's when I truly got passionate about advising and learning, and the consulting provides those two things. You learn so fast, and you advise
Mhm.
so fast as well, and I always say that it's all about you truly learn something when you're able to teach it. So with
Mhm.
consultancy, you do all of these things. So I was fortunate enough to do that in my career, early in my career, and then landed a job in Accenture in Venezuela. So where I'm
Mhm.
originally from, my accent is slightly, let's say, exotic. It was even more exotic around that time, yeah, and I had the opportunity to join such a multinational company, and the funny thing is that my first project was with partners from America, and I remember just thinking about, wow, I have so much to learn in here, and we started working on operating model for one of the national companies over there, and that's how I started immediately on my career. We started looking into strategy, we started looking into operating models, organization structures, even performance management systems, and not
Mhm.
just from the performance management individual point of view, but also from the balance scorecard of a company and so on. And then that kind of set my career in Accenture, where I was truly, they have the talent and organizational performance, I think was called at that time, organization
Mhm.
that was mainly the part of the Accenture that works with HR, let's put it that way, in general.
Mhm.
But I was always within the strategy team and that team, and somehow I always landed with the people strategy in my lap.
Mhm.
I said I landed, but I can see that I was always seeking for it, because I always was interested in what triggers people, and things
Mhm.
happen in organizations because people are making it happen. Uh, and it's through the interaction of people that the value is created. So I was
Mhm.
always curious about how can we get the best from each of us as an individuals, but also as a team, as we interact with each other as well. That took me in a journey where, like you mentioned, then I got transferred from the UK, from Venezuela to the UK. In that path, typical Accenture, you work in different
Mhm.
projects. So already went through Trinidad and Tobago on that path, landed in the UK, and then I will remember I was doing a project about succession planning for a very important oil and gas business, and typical consultant style. I did. The whole preparation how to do succession planning, and we had a project going on in Russia for leadership development.
Mhm.
And then I remember I was told exactly these words: is that if you are an expert in succession planning, you are an expert also in leadership development.
Mhm.
And I was 20 something, and I already knew, no, it's not the same thing, but we are consultants, so I'm gonna start learning. So as we prepare the proposal and so on, connected, and that was the beauty in Accenture. You can connect with these great minds and like any other big consultancies, and learn. And somehow I was learning Russian already, so I
Mhm.
used my Russian a little bit when I go there, and we start working on leadership development. And once again, that set up my career in Accenture, where my areas of expertise was human strategy and so on, succession planning, leadership development, and all of that. Then I realized. I was very passionate about being in Accenture and becoming a partner at that time, a senior executive was
Mhm.
called after. And then I realized that I truly like the HR things, but before coming to that full realization, I said, well, I need to get into the bread and butter of Accenture, and that's change management, at least in my area. So a lot of
Mhm.
SMP implementation, how to train, communicate, and lead in when you're doing these big ERP implementations. So then and what I did is I got sponsored by Accenture to do this postgraduate that you mentioned about change management,
Mhm.
and I did it for a few years, and then like I said, I came to this realization: I truly love the whole people side of things, and I was concerned that I wasn't able to see the full outcome of the things that I was doing. So you do the project for 3 months and then you go away and the client continues and then you hear the news and if you're like, oh great, but you're not part of it. So I
Yeah.
was desperate to look for to join the full journey. And I had to do a step in between. So I didn't manage to quite move into HR, but I moved to Conferry. So I
Mhm.
always describe Accenture like my work ethic, project management school, and then
Mhm.
I think Conferry is my talent school. I
Mhm.
learned a lot about how to use competency frameworks, how to deploy them in a way that can be useful for organizations, for people, how to
Mhm.
assess, coach people, and it was incredible. All my clients were VP of HR or CEOs, and I was thinking this is very different from the kind of clients I had in Accenture, where it used to be a little bit more into the IT part, especially towards the end of my career. And I remember that I told myself I'm going to stay here 3 years and decide if I'm going to stay here because I truly love this side of consultancy, or I'm going to move to HR. So I'm going to give
Mhm.
myself 3 years. And, I have the best or the luckiest unfortunate event of my life. That it was someone called me and saying, I don't want to be your client. It's someone I was pursuing to be my client. He said, I want to
Mhm.
be your boss. I have the perfect role
Wow.
for you, head of
Yeah.
talent for sales and marketing. And that's how I started in HR with Imperial Brands, and then making long story short, because you can imagine I have a lot of anecdotes and so on. But
Yeah.
Imperial gave me a lot of opportunities to work in different cultures, also to move from center of expertise to people partner roles, and even HR leadership roles, working in one of the business units that have their own CEO and everything. So that was all very interesting, but at the end, it's a tobacco industry. So as we know, especially in the supply chain, things in
Mhm.
tobacco, in terms of the market size, is changing. And then I got, I guess, the second luckiest unfortunate event of my life. I got a call from a headhunter saying, "Why don't you come and talk to ASM?" And I was like,
Mhm.
"ASM? who. I didn't know. I was in the Netherlands, and I didn't know that the Dutch has such a power knowledge on the semiconductor industry around the
Mhm.
world. I was expecting, Taiwan. That's what you hear on the news,
Yep.
China,
Yep.
and so on coming up. Samsung, of course, with all the microchips and all of that, and Intel from America. You hear all those things from the products as a your consumer and all of that, but you never hear the companies that are behind and the supply chain of all these industries that much. But then, obviously, from with my engineering background, I started talking about semiconductors. And yeah, I remember semiconductors when I was doing robotics, and this sounds interesting. But
So
they
coming a
say,
full circle
yeah,
from
exactly.
engineering to semiconductor. Yeah.
Exactly. So I'm doing HR for engineers. So I thought this sounds interesting, but I don't want to do talent again. I
Yeah.
remember saying that to my boss at that moment interviewing me. I said, no, but this is, and it truly was different. And when you are in Imperial, where you have 24,000 employees around the world, the HR organization is a lot significant bigger than what you see in ASM. When I joined, we were 2,000 people.
Hmm.
And then when I described the scope, I was like, oh, okay, the scope is huge. So I was literally looking anything from talent attraction all the way down to leadership development, succession planning, and so on. So learning, I always said to people, I look after everything except anything that is related to outsourcing, technology, or
Hmm.
compensation.
Okay.
Everything else sits in my area, and that's
Yeah.
how I started my journey with ASM. And I joined in such an exciting time where semiconductors were
Absolutely.
already doing well.
Yeah.
Uh, we did have this horrible pandemic happening around the world, but always looking at the silver lining, part of my ways of look at life. I thought, well, this actually then forced people to work from home. For semiconductors, that means that we need to create more chips for all these consumers,
Yeah.
and therefore our growth that was already coming, it got exponentially the growth even more. So now,
Absolutely.
yeah. So
Yeah.
now from an individual contributor role that I started like that, just literally in 6 months, my boss already have a conversation with me. What about if you get someone to support you in some of the activities? I'm like, of course, bring it to
Hmm.
me. And then from there, we went to 3 people in the team, then 5 people in the team, and now I'm gonna lead a 17 strong people, because
Wow.
when we look at the growth in the organization, then we're looking into since I started, in the next 3 years, we're going to be more than double of when I started. If you look at the share price, it's more than 6 times, I think, when I started right now. And also when you look at everything from the revenues to the margin operations to the workforce, it's just a story of growth. We have been a nice bubble to be in such a challenging time for a lot of people. But
Yeah, absolutely. That's what I was going to ask you here. I mean, I'm sure the viewers will have a lot of questions about your career and everything you're sharing. So feel free to comment about the questions you may have that you would want Carlos to answer. But in the meanwhile, Carlos, you joined ASM at the time when they started seeing this exponential growth, and with the recent chip crisis, ASM, I mean, they have been at the center of meeting the demands, and it has led to a period of amazing growth for the organization. So I think it would be very interesting to see how that growth translates to somebody who's managing the leadership and talent function, and what are some of the key elements which you're focusing on.
No, that's a great question. And I think if we look at into the success that we have so far, with the danger of sound a bit cheesy, it's all down to our people.
Mhm.
And if you look at the whole story, so let me start a little bit even back in the history of ASM. If you look at the history of ASM, it was funded by Chuck Del Prado, who actually went to Silicon Valley with an idea and then came back with an innovation innovation that then it became the mother company of so many companies, because you might, if you Google ASM, you might get confused with some other organizations that have ASM as part of it, and even the logo looks slightly similar. And it's because basically there was the first part of ASM, or the first wave, is a focus on innovation. So there were a lot of ideas on how to create these amazing reactions to create these fast semiconductors that make us, to create, for all the. I'm gonna show my age, but I remember the best example I have. If you remember the first mobile, and now you look at the current mobile. So the first mobile was, I remember we call it in Venezuela the brick, and I think it was the sex
Yes, I
translation.
remember that. I remember that. It was this big, huge black color thing. Yeah.
Exactly. So the semiconductor industry and ASM and Chuck Del Prado basically just work, and with the with all the theories that sits behind all of this, that is about how you can make the transistor smaller over time. It's about that's what he did. He literally created a lot of innovative ways on how to do it. Some of them became a spin-off, but the ASM stay at the heart. We became very knowledge or known about the atomic layer deposition. That is one of the most successful techniques that we have, and in the organization, and it is one of the many processes that you have to build a chip, and that's basically what when Chuck Del Prado came in as a CEO. Then we have the second wave where we focus on performance. So we want to, and that means that we have a lot of innovation. Then we start focusing on performance. So it's about how to make it everything more commercial, how to be more organized as an organization, because we bought some companies, so there were cultures all over the place. So we created the BUs or the business units and the support units to create that globalization of the organization. And we're still in a journey now where this growth is not giving us a breath, to settle down. We're literally moving into this. So there is a legacy of a culture where we focus on performance. We have the up and downs on the semiconductor industry, and suddenly we are faced with this super wave of production. So it does create a lot of challenges, because you have people from the past experiencing the up and downs. They were laid off when you have the down. That was typical on any semiconductor company in the past. And now suddenly it's like also about even though we look always at technologies and looking at the future, because of those up and downs, the way that semiconductors, and this is my very personal view from what I can see, it was a bit more, not conservative, but risk measure when you take decisions, because you're always thinking when is going to come the next down. Now, with this super cycle that we call it, there is no time to second guess yourself. We have to take risks. So that creates a whole new culture. So sorry, the long way to answer the question, but it's good to set the scene, because the challenge is not just the growth, it's also this legacy. So you have the people with all the beautiful knowledge from 20 years in the company, working on all these technologies that have been evolving over time. Then you have the new people coming in, some of them experience hired, coming from different companies that have already a big infrastructure, how to support them and so on. To then the new engineers that they're just coming from a completely new generation, that they are used to everything is on the mobile. I can do anything from my mobile. I don't need a laptop. I can so you have all these beautiful combination of things. So the challenge is big, but at the same time you can see from the results of last year and the quarterly results that we have been presenting, that we, even with with coronavirus and the pandemic happening around the world, we're still managing to do things, and it's all down to people. So and so there are two things that I always tell when I work with my team, and we as a team, and we call HR the people team. Actually, we rename it just to even reemphasize more. Human is not just a resource. We're talking about people with feelings, emotions, with families. Coronavirus exposed that to all of us
Yeah,
in a way.
absolutely.
So
Yeah.
don't be surprised if someone comes in through the door, because currently I'm in my parents-in-law house in the UK, but I'm very excited to do this interview. But these are the things that we are all getting used to. That is, we are all professional, but we also have a human side. So we are working with all these challenges and embrace it as best as we can. And so there are two things that we're doing. One is focusing on this human side of things, and we develop or define the three values in ASN. So we deliver, we innovate, and we care. We care is the one that we truly kind of pushing in the
Mhm.
organization, because we innovate, we deliver, we know we do it. And this is the other point I was telling my team regarding this is about, I take deliver as a given. We are going to deliver. We are all professionals. We're all going to work.
Mhm.
But I want to make sure that at the end of working with people, because we have to work with several people in the business unit, that they want to work with us. And that for
Mhm.
me is my interpretation of the we care. The people at the end of the project, or when something comes later, say, I need help on this. Instead of thinking, oh, I need to approach Carlos and his team, it's more like,
Mhm.
oh, I really want to approach them. They might have some ideas, they might have some things to do. So that's one part. The other part that is very important is the prioritization. Because obviously, coming from a challenging organization where you were looking into the up and down, so you were in some cases very extreme, not extreme, but streamlined. That's the word I'm looking for. Now is the part to be generous. So we're
Mhm.
looking into how to build. In some part of the infrastructure, we are very good, and we have been very good in a long in a lot of, for a long time. But there are areas that definitely we need to improve. So the prioritization is very important. So for me, those are the two things. So we care, because I already assume we deliver and we innovate is part of who
Mhm.
we are and how we hire people. And the other part is prioritization. We need to prioritize, and by doing so, aligning with people, because in that way, if we all have the similar expectations, we can actually then move forward.
I'm very curious to hear at this point in time, Carlos. You said that we care is very important, but we care. I mean, conceptually is a very good thing, but what are some of the things, some of the examples of how do you actually implement this feeling of we care, especially coming from the team which you're leading, which in a way, from what I hear, it looks like you guys are the ones who drive this whole culture of we care. And even if it's not directly driven by you, you're orchestrating that other people in the organizations are also driving that culture of we care.
I love it. I love it how you're positioning the question, because I think the key thing I tell my team is that we are enablers, but we have to lead the enabling. So it's the best analogy. And I'm sorry, I'm gonna take it a bit off the conversation, but it's still related to technology. But I still remember, for example, when Steve Jobs came out with the iPad. I
Mhm.
just literally, I just thought, wow, my God, this is something I don't need at all. Why will I have an iPad? I have my mobile, I have my laptop. I don't need that. So for me, that's something showing leading enabler. Now I have two tablets. I have my personal tablet that is the huge iPad to watch all my Netflix and all of that when I'm traveling, or when I could travel. Well, now I'm traveling again. This is a great experience going back to travel. And then the Samsung tablet to work out to share thinking and so on. So for me, that's exactly what I tell my team. Not all the time we cannot just follow the demand of the customer. We have to be ahead of the demand of the customer,
Mhm.
and then somehow lead them towards, or influence them into the way of things that we need to do. So going more specifically, if you look into our annual report, last year we already announced that we did the first engagement survey ever last year. It's a long story short, because it's a very funny story. We started with the previous mentality of streamlining. So when I started in ASM, the way I was implementing stuff to make it happen is I have just two or three projects that will be global, and then I
Mhm.
have other projects that I always call it they have to be local. And what I
Mhm.
mean is, like, it has to be a pilot that we can implement locally, and then if they're successful, we can expand. So I
Yeah.
was planning to do my local approach with engagement and doing in the US. And then with the new CEO coming up, I said, no, no, we're going to do it globally. So
Mhm.
Benjamin have been, and this is what is amazing, because it's a lot easier to lead enabling if you have leaders that are already also enabling. So Benjamin came into the picture and said, no, guys, I love the idea, but let's do it global. So we went global with engagement survey. And we have 94% participation. In my life, in any engagement survey I have done, you always do the chasing, and also for people for completion. I have never come across 94%. So it shows how much people are interested in the conversations and establishing the conversations. We also did an analysis around inclusion and diversity, because
Mhm.
like any other tech company, we are very curious on how to attract a female talent
Yeah.
into tech industry. So that's one of the biggest challenges that we are faced, like any other industry. So we did a whole diagnostic around that, and now this year we have established Converge, that is our first ERG group, and it's with 3 leaders across the globe that are leading this with me, which is amazing. We have 70 people signing up into this. So I can go on and on with the we care.
Mhm.
So we do, and but what I want to leave you and the people that are listening or watching is that I apply the same approach. We prioritize, so we prioritize what we can do globally, and then
Mhm.
locally it's about empowering and enabling. So who are the
Mhm.
most important people for you would be the managers. So during the engagement journey, we um, train a lot of the managers. We also launched the power of an open mind last year. That is our employer
Mhm.
or employee value proposition. Actually, super excited. We won 2 awards so far in with this
Congratulations.
brand. Thank you.
Yeah.
But the exciting part is that when we launched it in the middle of the pandemic, and we were very, we have to face the challenges that we have. We cannot bring people into workshops to interact
Mhm.
and so on. So we went into virtual, but once again, the hunger on the organization, and this is what I always go back, is the people. So we have 2/3 of the managers across the globe actually coming to the training, and sometimes even coming twice to the training because they
Mhm.
like it so much, that much. And now we continue with this journey. So now with the values and the culture, we're gonna keep continue focusing a lot on the soft skills. Like I said, I'm not gonna say we are there yet. There is a lot, and I'm sure if there are some of our employees watching, some of them will recognize some of the things. Other ones might be still a bit of a skeptical, and that's what I'm after, and to make sure that we convert those skepticals going forward. But the only way is by enabling managers and enabling also your people team in the local locations, because they are the ones that are having the conversations with an employee. And one
Yeah.
of the key things for next year is going to be employee experience. We will
Mhm.
start we will start analyzing how the touch points with employees, how it's being perceived, and what kind of emotions and motivation is driving. So anyway, I
Mhm.
have a lot to talk to you about this, but I don't want to take all the time on that.
Absolutely. Look, I'm interested to take one of the audience questions here. So someone has asked, I don't know who it is, as I is chose LinkedIn user. How easy or difficult is it to attract people into the semiconductors business, given typically most would not really know about it? How does ASM make sure to attract young blood?
Very, very, very good question, and this is exactly one of the questions that we keep asking ourselves, because I don't think there is a static answer to this, but I really appreciate it. So the first thing is, I think easy or difficult. I think it is challenging in the sense that, similar to me, you. I knew about semiconductors because I'm an engineer, but if I didn't do engineering, perhaps I listened to this in one of the news talking about the industry or
Mhm.
the chips now scarce that we have around the world, and all of that. But yeah, truly it's difficult. So what we're doing right now, if you check our LinkedIn company site at the moment, is start to really translate into plain language
Mhm.
how actually we contribute towards the better of society. Because this is the one thing that really gets me personally passionate about ASM. Is like when I see the sounds ridiculous, but I did do this. We were watching the Mars helicopter on TV.
Mhm.
My partner and I turn around to him and say, "We made that happen."
Mhm.
Somewhere in that helicopter, I'm sure there is a chip that went through one of our machines.
Yeah.
So we need to translate that into that language. I think to bring new people, new generations, we need to continue engaging on that in that element. Also, this connects to the point of also something that's going to be a priority for us next year, is to truly be a purpose driven company. Like I said, I do feel it. I know what the purpose emphasis,
Mhm.
but does anybody outside of us and even inside the company knows it? We're going to put a lot of emphasis around that, so people can actually, when they join a company like, for example, we just did the investor day a couple of days ago, also in LinkedIn if you want to look at it. But we made some pages around how we're going to be net zero carbon in just a couple of years,
Mhm.
how we're going to double our business also as well in a couple of years. It's just and I think that's the way how to find these messages, and messages that are going to be relevant for the new generations, to make sure that we can engage with them. But you have to listen to them as well. So there are a lot of things we think is important to tell them. We also need to listen to them and listen to, well, what perhaps what could be a blind spot that we're not looking at. That's what I always think is a continuous learning. It's not a static answer. You ask me this question next
Absolutely.
year, and I will have perhaps another
A
more
different
colors into
answer.
it. Yeah.
Absolutely. And I think that's the key with the newer generation, or actually with anybody from any generation, that the business has some meaning, that they understand how they are impacting to different things. And then, of course, certain topics are very important to the millennials and Gen Z, and one of them is sustainability, the net carbon thing. The other very important topic is diversity and inclusion. And I know that personally you are very passionate about diversity and inclusion, and you're also driving these agenda in ASM. So my question here is, how are you driving this beyond it just being a numbers game, that we got this much female population, or we got this much from this particular group, or we are doing we've got people from the LGBTQIA this much percentage? Because sometimes, corporations, the way they measure, they get focused on just those measurements. So what are different steps you're taking to truly, drive the agenda?
First, and once again, thank you so much for such a good answer, such a good question. And I think that you mentioned a point. So let me start with the personal story, because I think it's all come down to making sure that you get once again, it's down to people, and so you have to get people that are passionate about this. So
Mhm.
I come from a family of not single mom, divorced mom. My mom was the main source of income in the house for three boys. Having three boys in the house, you can imagine it can be sometimes quite difficult to handle.
Yeah.
When you are a parent by yourself, and I look back and I think how she did do it. And we were lucky because her employer was across the street. It was a TV station,
Mhm.
so she could take us to work. The work provided like kindergarten and provided some few other stuff like that actually make it easier for her. So for me, it's ingrained on me. Uh, with the experiences also I have with Imperial Tobacco and Imperial brands, and when we went to Japan, you see what are the challenges in there, but then you move to Dominican Republic. So in Japan
Mhm.
we are with sales commercial team, so everybody educated and employment extremely low. But then I
Mhm.
go to Dominican Republic, to one of the biggest factories in cigar. You have people that with literacy challenges. So you start, for me, it's like, it, especially that move, it remind me going back to kind of to my roots. So seeing all these, in some situations, single moms dealing with coming to work, providing, aspiring to be something else. I can say very proudly, my mom moved from being just, starting with very admin roles to be manager of a department. And at some
Mhm.
point, we were having conversations about how to engage people, how to lead teams, and I was like, wow,
Mhm.
I never expected that from my mom, because I remember all the admin work that she was doing when I was growing
Mhm.
up. So anyway, so it gets very close to me. And then from the other angle, it's also very from the personal journey. Being an engineer, a male engineer in Venezuela, sets a stereotype, and then being a
Mhm.
gay male engineer in Venezuela also sets some challenges.
Mhm.
And as I became more international, I found myself being usually the only Latin American in the leadership team wherever I see. So
Mhm.
what is funny is that because of my desire of growth and my desire to learn, and the way I always say the values that my mom somehow involved of hardworking, and I always hear the voice of Michelle Obama in my head saying, your shortcomings, your struggles are your strength.
Mhm.
So believing all of this for me is easy, but at the same time, looking at what happened with the movement of Black Lives Matters and last year, I just started to realize that I did go through difficult challenges. The only thing is that I brushed it off very quickly. But the
Mhm.
question is, should we really be facing these challenges? So when you look into now transferring this to our corporate organization, so when we look at what we're doing in ASM, what I'm trying to do is to make sure, I said I, but we, because it's all the people team and it's the leadership team. Benjamin is once again really helping with the senior management team to enable all these conversations, to truly look into how to make sure that we are have an inclusive conversation. I'm telling you
Mhm.
about a CEO that actually typed to me in a chat saying, Carlos, let's make sure that that the people team is having conversation with people about well-being, because with
Mhm.
this growth, people are really under a lot of stress. So this is,
Yeah.
it comes from the man on the top.
Yeah.
So it's people who makes all these things. So what we did with is we did the diagnostic last year, which is obviously highlighted some things that we knew, but also brought attention to other things that we didn't know. So what are the hotspots in the company where perhaps we need to focus more? And there are two things very basic that, oh, not basic because they're actually quite challenging, but very simple is the word that we're focusing. One is we want to have an inclusive culture. So part
Yeah.
of the pulse survey that we're going to do will include questions around inclusivity, how inclusive our culture is. And the other point is about female talent, like as I mentioned before. But how we doing this is what I think is the smart way is that we are doing it with the people that wants to do it. So the leaders
Mhm.
that we pick to lead the converge, they are really passionate about this. We have
Mhm.
Lynette, who is a Singaporean now living in the Netherlands. She is absolutely amazing. Thinking about, I'm a female leader that moved countries and I have been in ASM for a long time, so I can make a change. Then we have
Mhm.
Yvonne, who is a new joiner. She's a leader on the manufacturing area in Singapore right now. Also, with a huge passion, she has been working with ERGs in the past. And controversially, we have Mete, who is a man in the US, but he's from Turkish heritage, if I remember right. Once again, someone that is also very passionate about being inclusive and so on. And by having this spread and then working and recruiting people that are also passionate about this topic, I'm completely convinced that we can make the change, because it's not just about the people team or HR, well, as we call it outside, and the leadership. It's also we as a leader, and I love because
Mhm.
Method say that in the meeting with the Converge team. We say, who wants to be a leader? Because any of you of the 70 on this call globally can be a leader. What part you want to lead on? And then we will help you to make the right connections, to work with the right teams to make things happen. But those are the two things in a nutshell that we're going to focus. We're definitely focusing on making an inclusive culture, and that's for everybody,
Mhm.
LGBTQ, gender, race, everything. But we know gender is a particular challenge for the tech industry, so we're putting an attention into how to attract, retain, and develop female leaders.
Female leadership. And I think you touched on the point of the whole stress and burnout which has come about with COVID, and there's been a question about it. And I'm going to just summarize the question which Rushit has asked, that COVID-19 pandemic has resulted in significant talent challenges, hiring freezes, layoff, salary freezes, cancel bonus, teleworking, increased employee stress, and burnout. So even when people are doing all this increased work, stress, burnout, they're facing all these issues, which I'm sure and I hope is not the matter with ASM. But how, as a company, are you helping to overcome this burnout? And there was recently this whole article in the last few weeks about the Great Resignation, especially affecting people coming from tech companies or companies which are growing during this time. So I think this is a great question which Rushit has asked.
No, thank you so much, Rashid. I really appreciate it. But this is where we live in a little bubble
Mhm.
in the semiconductor industry. I wouldn't say it's only ASM, but I'm very proud how we have managed it so far. I think we can do some more stuff, and that's what we're looking into as well. But let me talk about the specifics. So when the pandemic started, the first thing, we have always been looking after the safety of our employees. So safety is ingrained into all of us, especially me, being a production engineer. It's like I'm an industrial engineer. I always think about safety. I always apologize a little bit, but sometimes unapologetically so. I'm the party pooper. I already said, because there are certain things that say, "Oh, this cannot be happening here," and I can tell you a few stories, especially in Dominican Republic, where I have to call off certain activities to make sure that we're doing safely. So anyway, looking at the safety of employee. That's that was the first thing that we need to do. And if you look into our how we manage our policies, we always go slightly beyond of what is required locally, and we're trying to make sure that when you have to work from a particular location, and so you cannot do the teleworking or working from home, then that you can do that safely. So we have been putting some very strong policies from the very beginning, and I must say that our safety team have been great on this, working with all the different part of the businesses and so on. Then the other part that we have been looking into is definitely, so there were all the policies immediately put in place on how to keep communications open between all of us in terms of how to work from home and what to expect. And in some, so depending on the locations as well, we took different communications and expectations, because obviously the locations and the regulation change. As you know, if we rewind a little bit, a year and a half, in Asia started all the lockdowns, and then it took some time before it came to Europe, and then the
Europe,
US
yeah.
was later. So you can see the wave happening that way. So it was very interesting for us as a global company to try to learn quickly from what was happening in Asia and anticipate what was happening here. So that's from the safety point of view, making sure our employees safe it was the first thing. The second thing was ensuring that people can work. It was very interesting because, like I said, we're doing very good things, and some areas we need to improve. We did have a Skype and so on, and Microsoft Teams was starting a pilot. The IT team, once again, another team that smashed it. They really quickly make sure that we have all the tools available, because the challenges with the collaboration tools online is that IP, comes from our people, and IP is our value in a way. So whatever intellectual property that we have on these technologies is the key. So we needed to make sure that was secure and all of that. And then the third part that we did is launching the engagement survey, is to understand through the engagement survey, how can we make sure that people are doing well in the different areas and are engaged also with the organization and so on. So I think the next stage that we're going to be looking into, once again, we're looking into the inclusive culture, we're looking into the purpose culture and so on. And I will expect, right now, we're also looking into a formal board flexible working policy that will be launched very soon. So I will be looking into, I think, more into that direction and the well-being. I think those are topics that are going to come back even more strongly. And personally, I did fun things like I got everybody on the third floor on Almere to do a pop quiz a couple of times to introduce also the new joiners on the third floor. So we use a couple of virtual tools to do that and have a little bit of fun, because that's the thing. It can become a very much meeting after meeting after meeting. So how can we make the human part and
The
the fun
cultural
part?
aspect,
Yeah.
yeah. Yeah. Yeah. So, yeah, I'm just mindful. I just realized we've been talking so much that we are pretty much reaching the end. So, I'm going to ask you a couple of quick questions to just wrap this all up. So, according to you, which skills, technical or soft skills, are most important for a professional to get into senior level leadership roles?
Wow, I think I think it's the emotional intelligence. I think that when I look at the studies that are coming out, just I would say recently, because if you look at the history of HR, the studies were from 50, 40 years ago, and then it kind of the second wave came up with emotional intelligence. So I would like to summarize it into that. Because I truly think that the way when you look at where teams are effective, and part of the engagement, we took some of the top engaging managers to do master class. I wouldn't call it master class. We said learning from each other. So how they actually um, engage their teams. And it came down to two things: understanding your team. And to understand your team, you need to talk to them, and then you individualize the way on how you manage the team. So these managers always talk about, well, I know so and so have small kids, so I avoid calls for them in the morning. I do it after they went to school, and I know after 5 p.m. they have to drop the kids to school, and we agree that after 7, then we can have a conversation. Because this is the literally, I was just talking to my own boss Ralph about this, because we're always talking about development and well-being and so on. And I was telling him, yeah, well, so for me, well-being is, I think it's a very personal thing. So it's about, if I need to work on the weekend to have a quieter week, I prefer to do that. It doesn't mean that I work the full weekend. It's just I take a couple of hours, check my emails, put other things, answer some questions, and then I can come down that on Monday, then I can start with a fresher start. Is it the right thing or the wrong thing to do? I think it depends very much to the individual, and that's why emotional intelligence is so important for leaders. The second
Yeah.
thing for me is learning agility, and that's about how to be able to learn from your previous experiences to apply into a new complete experience. I think if you look into COVID and the pandemic, people that were successful as a leader, it was because they were able to immediately adapt to the virtual situation and start to trying to replicate and being innovative on the way on how to engage with individuals. The rest is all you can learn it. You can learn skills, you can learn knowledge. Most people we will be smart in the sense of intelligence and so on. So these two, I think, for me, will be make the difference for a leader.
Emotional intelligence and agility to be able to learn. Look, I usually end these at 45 minutes, and I still have a couple of audience questions here, Carlos. So I would definitely tag you into those questions so you can answer them as well. But I just needed your quick closing comment about and that's been an audience question in our previous podcasts, which has encouraged me to include that as a question line of questioning here. What is one change? It could be mindset, it could be the way you do things, or stopping the way you do things. One change you made in your career which helped you to reach the stage you are in. So if you were to look back, one thing you changed which helped you reach the level you are at currently.
Okay, I will give you one in the past and one right now,
Okay.
if I'm allowed. So one in the past, I think, is about surrounding your people with the right people. Surrounding yourself with the right people. That's the right phrase. I always have this mantra very early in my career. I always say, "Good thing happen to good people, and everything happened for a reason." Meaning that sometimes even when bad things happen, you might not know why, but if you're surrounded with the right people, you can always learn how to come out and rebound from that experience. And so I think that's fundamental. And then I do want to take the opportunity to say the one now, because literally in 3 days I'm gonna be I'm gonna have my anniversary of daily meditations, and I don't advocate for everybody, because I think, once again, well-being is for a different thing. But if something that will have changed in my life, meditating earlier. So I will encourage people to find, what is it. It could be yoga, it could be being in the bath or in the shower, taking some extra 5 minutes, but some time for yourself somehow that will recharge you or energize. So make sure that you look after yourself, people. I think that's very important.
All right. With that, we are going to wrap up today's podcast. Thank you so much, Carlos. We do have some very good questions still waiting for your answers. I'll tag you to that so you can let the viewers know. Thank you, all the viewers, for your questions and keeping this engaging. Please do remember to follow Carlos. His LinkedIn profile is tagged on this post. And if you find these podcasts interesting, please do remember to follow me on LinkedIn as well, as I keep on doing these podcasts. Thank you, Carlos. It was great pleasure. Thank you for sharing so openly all these stories and all your experiences.
Thanks for the invitation, and thank you everybody for listening. I hope you found something to learn from it.